welcome you to our Building Mathematical Confidence in Elementary Students Professional Development. And I am Katrina Robertson. I teach at Eastside Elementary in Greenbrier, and I have taught for 6 years. So this is my 6th year teaching. And my first year, I taught 4th grade math and science, and then I switched to 3rd grade for 4 years for math. And then I got to have the privilege of looping up with my students this past school year to now teach 4th grade math with them. So I have the same group of kiddos, which is great because we kind of got our time cut short last school year. And so it's just been such a great time to build rapport. And some of the information that I'm sharing with you today is really founded on building rapport with our students. Because much of what I'm sharing with you today couldn't have been possible without having a great relationship with our students. And so that's kind of the foundation for that. Our school has just recently been rewarded the Model PLC. And so we've been through the process for 3 years, and we received that national certification this past school year. And so I say that not to brag or anything, but just to give you kind of a foundation of what kind of like our journey from what I've learned through my experience in math classes. We have really hit hard John Hattie's strategies, and I sent out a survey previous to our meeting asking how familiar you were with John Hattie's strategies. And it was a surprise that, several people have not heard about his research or his strategies. And so today we're going to be really emphasizing John Hattie and his research and effect sizes and all of that really builds a lot of confidence in our students. And so we'll go ahead and get started with our title today. It says, I can, and I put ... do this, because I emphasize the ... because many times our students say I can, but then they're kind of like, what can I do? What are the words after that statement? And so we're going to emphasize today the importance of clarity and communication with our students to help them build that confidence. So I'm going to go to our next screen. I always enjoy leading my sessions as well as my classroom with a learning objective. So every day we have either the same objective because we're working towards it several days, or it's a new objective that day. And so our learning objective for today's professional development is I can bring clarity and engagement to the classroom by applying effective teaching strategies that develop student mathematical confidence. When I introduce a learning objective in my classroom, we highlight some of the key vocabulary words from that learning target. As you noticed in this one for today, clarity, engagement, and confidence are the 3 vocab words that are highlighted because those are the ones that we're going to necessarily hit on throughout the rest of this presentation. And so clarity, we want to bring clear and concise learning targets to our students. We want them to be engaged so that they feel that they are learning something meaningful. And then we want to build that confidence. And the effective teaching strategies, as I mentioned earlier, are going to be focused on John Hattie and his effect sizes. All right, so before we get started, I would like to hear a little bit from you on our corkboard, just some struggles that you personally have experienced or encountered with having a difficult time building confidence and mathematical abilities of our students. And so if you don't mind, go ahead and post those, and I'll kind of look through them and talk about those just to get us warmed up for today. What are some of your biggest struggles that you have with students in building their mathematical confidence? If they fail once, it seems like it is all over and confidence is shot. I have a student testimony I'm going to share at the end about that. Shut down before they even try. Exactly. It's difficult when a student doesn't start with an open mindset. And we're going to talk about a growth mindset today as well. My highest learners are often worried about making the smallest mistakes. We're going to talk about how students build their confidence through looking at their own mistakes and modifying those mistakes to learn from them. Self-destructive talk. another personal experience I've had with a student, and I'm going to share about him at the end. Knowing their numbers, 1, 2, 3, so even just that place value. Taught English this past year, but found myself helping them in math because so many failed. Okay, so using that cross-curricular as well. I read, I don't do math. Oh, that's funny. But there's a lot of reading and math too. We've definitely have been seeing the emphasis of reading throughout, and I've actually started teaching a lot of reading in my math class. So thank you for those. We're going to hit on several of those. The first thing I want to mention is some of the biggest struggles that I've experienced that you might be able to relate to as well, whether you've taught math or you've taught reading. The little girl on the left side of the picture, she is shrugging her shoulders as if she's saying, I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about. All this vocabulary is going right over my head. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know the end goal. And so she's very confused. She's lacking clarity. And then we've seen these kids on the right side in our classrooms just putting their hands on their faces, just kind of like, I'm ready for the day to be over. And that is the worst kind of mentality that we can have in our classrooms. We want them to be engaged and excited about what they're learning. And so several times we'll see some students, and I'm going to make the assumption as well that a lot of times it can be our boys that become very disinterested in our classrooms. And so we need to learn to engage them a little better. At the bottom of the screen, though, on this slideshow, there is a contradiction here. It says better performance, higher self-esteem, and improved psychological well-being. So we mentioned the biggest struggles, but these are the things that are opposite of those struggles. And so I have a quote here from Bobson Wong and Larissa Bukalov, and they say, motivation, why people do what they do, affects every aspect of schooling. Without motivation, student learning becomes difficult, if not impossible. Motivated students tend to have better performance, higher self-esteem, and improved psychological well-being. Keeping motivational strategies in mind can enhance confidence to do math, which can reduce their math anxiety and lower academic achievement. And therefore, that quote just stands out to me that we have to combat these struggles with engaging those students, helping them be motivated so that they do have better performance, higher self-esteem, and improved psychological well-being. So how do we do that? That's the question. Before we answer that question, I have a fill-in-the-blank activity for you to do. As mathematicians and math teachers, we want to always wrap around our instruction and our teaching strategies with the mathematical practices. And so on your screen, you will have a fill-in-the-blank activity there's just 4 of the mathematical practices listed, but I just want you to match the missing words into those blanks just to get us warmed up with our mathematical practices, refresh our memory on those, and then we'll see the connection between those with our learning targets today. Give me a little bit of time to do that. We hide our student names. Here we go. So we have mathematical practice number 1, number 3, number 6, and number 7. And it's okay to make mistakes here because we oftentimes forget about these mathematical practices and the importance of how. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and answer them. We have several that have responded. So mathematical practice number 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. We desire for our students, like those students that just kind of hit a road bump, especially if it's a difficult task, that they struggle. Somebody mentioned on the cork board, they just give up. And so we want to encourage our students to persevere through that. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Being able to have productive discourse in the classroom goes with that mathematical practice, and there are great opportunities for our students to help one another through those arguments. Attend to precision. We want students to be precise with their modeling, with their equations, with their numbers system. And then the last one, look for and make use of structure. Now, I mentioned only these 4 because I'm going to relate these 4 to some of our strategies that we're about to look at. While there are 8 different practices, we're going to focus in on those core 4. And this is a list of those practices as a refresher. But as I mentioned, we're just going to focus in on a few of them today. It would take hours to really emphasize every one of those. All right, so as I mentioned in my survey that I sent out to you before our professional development today, I asked you if you had any familiarity with John Hattie and his research. And I know this is a very difficult poster to see because there's a lot of words on it. So I'm not going to just zoom in on every part of it, but we are going to look at a couple of pieces of this document. John Hattie is very famous for his research on visible learning. He has discovered 250 plus influences on student achievement, and they are separated into separate categories. So originally with his research, he started to study the student, he studied the home, the school, the curriculum, the teacher, and also he continued to study the classroom and how there are influences within each of those pieces that affect student achievement. And so we're going to zoom in on the teaching strategies, in particular, instructional strategies today, but you can do much more research on John Hattie, and he will provide you with more resources in order to implement his visible learning skills as well. He wrote the book Visible Learning, and he also wrote the book Visible Learning for Teachers. So there's a complete website that you can check out, and I have the resource at the end of the presentation that you can look more into his research. But he is very big, I used this term earlier, effect size. Okay, so I know it's difficult to see, I'm about to zoom in a little bit, but the effect size is the amount of growth that students can achieve in a year. So these teaching strategies that are listed on this screen are given a number. Beside it is decimal 59, decimal 42, 1, decimal 29, and 0.40 or 0.4 tenths is a 1 year of growth. Okay, and so if you are implementing this strategy in your classroom, his research says that it can produce a year of growth, and some of these are more than a year of growth. So I just wanted to choose a few of these that we're going to look at today. Clear goal intentions, that has over a year of growth. Learning goals versus no goals, that has over about a year and a half worth of growth. Planning and prediction, 0.76, success criteria, over a year of growth as well. And so those are huge increments of success if you are implementing those in your classroom. And we're going to take a look at clear goal intentions, learning goals, and then success criteria in the next couple of slides. But I wanted to present to you the numbers in this math presentation so you see that there is some foundation for why his research is very valued. All right, I'm going to try to play this video. I'm going to put it on all of your devices just so that I know that sound is working. And you will, don't watch it just yet, but you're going to push play. This is a group of my students. I teach 3 classes, and this group in particular are learning their I can statement for a new skill that they are learning. So they recently learned this skill, and they are creating an I can statement to help us set up our clear learning intentions for our classroom for that day and a few days after, since we're working on that skill. And so I'm going to let you watch it independently, and then I'm going to pause it, and we're going to come back and do a breakout session just to discuss with each other what did you notice in the video. Okay, so go ahead and push play on your end. I'll push play on my end as well. You can watch it either way. All right, so that was my classroom, and we were working on, like I said, building that clarity piece for our students, because I firmly believe that when students know what they're learning and why they're learning it, then they have a more investment in their work ethic as well. And so we're going to go into breakout rooms through Zoom. And then first off, what I would like for you to do with your group is to first introduce yourself. Let's network, make some connections. And then I would like for you to answer this question together. What did you notice in the video regarding clarity and engagement? And I'm going to leave it at that, and then we'll talk about it when we come back. So let me get these breakout rooms going. Hand signals and their vocabulary to help understand what their learning target is for that day. And I do not just mention it at the beginning of class. We, after we're working towards the target in the middle of class, I will also reference it, and then at the end of the class, just to see where we are on that learning target continuum, and which I'm actually going to do during our presentation today as well, to model that. As I did at the beginning of our session, I mentioned the I can statement, and if we were fourth graders, we would do hand signals to all those vocabulary words as well, and then we would revisit it in the middle and revisit it at the end. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, and just a couple people, what did you notice about the video regarding clarity and engagement?
I loved that you repeated it and they repeated it and they knew exactly what they were going to do. And then they told it to each other, and that it really made them own what they were going to do in class that day.
And you also brought it full circle to where they came back together to do it the final time all at once. I thought that was great.
Right. Dr. Trumbull has mentioned that Madison had a great observation and a connection. Would you like to share, Madison?
I was just mentioning that in your video, it was a really good representation of what whole brain teaching really looks like in the classroom. And you could see really well that, the repeated, I guess I'm not really good at clarifying, but the repeated instruction of it really helped the students to gain some confidence. And then using the whole body, I felt like really fuses the concept that you're about to teach in the students' brains. So they were confident about what they're about to learn, and they were all engaged because they were using their whole body.
Exactly. Yes, great connection. Great connection to that. All right, so I'm going to move on. Thank you for that feedback on that. So that whole video was really emphasizing setting clear learning targets. I know that we have it on our board, and we want to emphasize what we're learning. However, sometimes even for myself, I've been doing this for a couple of years now with the whole brain teaching, is that it will just be on the board as words, and the students hardly ever glance at it, or I never respond back to it. And so being intentional with what those learning targets are will build our vocabulary. It is multisensory, so you're meeting the diverse needs of our students. Students are taking ownership of their learning, and then they're also having that clarity of their skills and the relationship between skills. When we look at all of our learning targets, we can see, especially in math, the place value emphasis that carries on throughout the entire school year. And so students are making connections from one skill to the next based on that learning target set for the day. Okay, so I have another video for you to watch. I told you it'd be full of videos today. This video that I'm about to show you is of a student who we've already gone through the I can statements, the learning targets, and now she is building her confidence with those skills by self-recording her scores on a common formative assessment. And so in my classroom, we will take assessments, and then the students will be able to grade them themselves, as well as report them onto a Google slide, but that has all of the learning targets. So I'm going to let her explain her learning targets to you and how she's self-recording, and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead and push play on your end, and it should work just fine. And I'll give you it's about a minute, and then we'll come back. All right, so that was one of my students that, like I said, she was telling us how she was utilizing her learning targets to identify what skills she either is doing well on or which skills she needs to continue working towards. And this is on this screen is just a blow up of what she had on her screen. And every unit we would have our essential learning targets, and then the students, of course, would, after they get their CFA and they grade it with me and with themselves, then they would go onto their Google slide and complete their stars as a great visual method for them to identify where they are on that target. And so as we progress, they would reassess and be able to see that they have made progress on that skill. And of course, if some of our students, they will receive red stars as she did at the beginning. And that tells me more so that I need to work on work with that student one-on-one. And then just to help them become not defeated by seeing that, because it may look like, oh, I have a red star, I'm never going to pass and get a green. But to see that once they reassess and they have, you know, extra support, then they are able to make that star turn to green. And so that's just a great representation of how they are working for themselves independently, where their scores are only shown to them and myself. All right, another video. Y'all are just going to get videoed out today. As mentioned earlier, when we did our cork board, someone had mentioned that some students have the tendency to, if they get something wrong, they kind of get stuck in the mud and they don't want to get out of it. This student that I'm about to show you, he was a student that had some difficulties last school year with some skills, math skills, but this school year he has just blossomed because he has such a good attitude about his mistakes. I have another student who I'll mention later on about my success story who had some very difficult times learning how to grow from mistakes. And so I'll mention him after a little bit, but I would like for you to see this. This is just an activity that the students did after they took their unit test to learn exactly where their mistakes were made and how excited he is to learn from that mistake. So go ahead and watch that on your end as well. Okay, so let's talk. We're going to go back into our breakout rooms, fast and furious. Just based on the two videos that that we watched and haven't talked about so far about the learning targets, and then also this student learning from their mistakes. In what ways does the mindset of learning from mistakes improve clarity and student engagement? I'd like for you to quickly talk with your group. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes this time just to be with that group and answer that question. So let me pull up our breakout rooms. I'm going to stop my share. Right, I believe our groups have joined us back. And so the question I asked before you left was, in what ways does a mindset of learning from mistakes improve clarity and student engagement? And for time's sake, we're not going to share out, but I do want to, I'm sure that you had great conversation about some of these key elements. This is, again, mathematical practice number 1, making sense of problems and, excuse me, and persevering in solving them. And so based on those videos that you've seen, and of course you can do learning from mistakes in multiple ways. That was just one format I've used in my classroom. But it does develop a growth mindset. Students are more willing to identify, oh, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm growing from them. I'm learning from them. It's not a dead-end road. It improves the attitudes towards mathematics. It builds confidence. It lets students realize that there are some real-life lessons that they can learn from that. And then they can learn from each other. So you can do learning from mistakes by having students work together to identify errors in their work. We do that a lot of times in our classroom, is just having students look at some errors from other people and knowing that it's a safe place to talk through those mistakes. So that helps those students learn that confidence can be built through that. All right, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm going to reflect back to our learning objective to see if we're on target. We make sure that we are bringing clarity and engagement to the classroom by applying effective teaching strategies that develop student mathematical confidence. So far we have talked about clarity and a little bit of engagement techniques and bringing that full circle to building that confidence. We've talked about some Hattie strategies such as the whole brain teaching with the I can statements, and then also with learning from mistakes. All right, so I want to transition a little bit from looking at the effect sizes of those teaching strategies to now looking at effect sizes of discussion and reciprocal teaching. So this is an image zoomed in on John Hattie's research, as mentioned earlier, and the effect sizes that such items such as class discussion, feedback, questioning, and then also a discussion technique called jigsaw method, reciprocal teaching that we'll look at in just a moment. Those all have very high effect sizes. Some are more than 2 years of growth. Jigsaw method it looks like it's about 3 years of growth if students do it effectively in the classroom and consistently. And so we're going to zoom in on a little bit of these with the classroom discussion and reciprocal teaching, and look at some strategies to include those in our classrooms. All right, so we have done quite a bit so far with inside the classroom. However, there are definitely techniques that you can use if you're doing virtual learning. Flipgrid, I'm sure that you've heard of this program, is a great platform for student discussion and critiquing the reasoning of others. This program, Flipgrid, allows students to video themselves solving a problem, having a discussion, and then they can partner up with another student and watch each other's videos. And so how we do this at my school is, like I said, I teach 4th grade, so these are 4th grade students, but they are teaching a 3rd grade class how to round to the nearest 1,000. So in 3rd grade, they were working on rounding to the nearest 10 and to the nearest 100. And so in 4th grade, they boost that up to higher digits. And so they are trying to teach our 3rd graders and a little extension of the rounding that they have been working on in their own classrooms. And then we also partnered with a 5th grade classroom, and the 5th graders did a video teaching our students, our 4th graders, about exponents, because we were at the time working on place value with multiples of 10. And so they were being able to say about 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000 times more, and translate that to exponents. And so my students learned something new and fresh from the 5th graders without me necessarily having to teach that. And so they love this interactive piece. They can use their marker boards and they can just video themselves teaching on a question. And so that's a great way if you're doing virtual teaching to engage those students as well as in the classroom too. All right, I have a video for you again. This is what I call a Zoom breakout session in the classroom. So we've practiced Zoom professionally as adults, and we also did our Zoom last school year for virtual learning. However, I never tried breakout rooms virtual learning last school year, so I thought I'd give it a shot in the classroom because we are limited on how close we can get to each other. And so it's very difficult for group work. But I wanted to try this out, and so I did in my classroom, and it worked great. The students had earphones, and they could join Zoom, and I just created breakout rooms for them. And then they also each had a reciprocal role. So they're working on discussing, they're working on critiquing each other's work, and then they each have an important role to help build their confidence with their particular responsibility. And so I'm going to show you, go ahead and watch this video. It's about 36 seconds. You can watch it and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Go ahead. All right, if you heard her, she, sweet little girl, she said, "Yes, Axel, do you have a question?" And so her job for that particular question was to be the planner. So each of the students received a role, a reader, identifier, planner, or a checker, and they each had to solve the problem. So they were doing virtually their Zoom breakout, performing each of those roles to solve that question. And she was the planner. She was working out the question at that time to help plan for their solution. And the other student had a question, and so she paused her thinking and asked, "Okay, what is your question?" And so that just emphasizes how their communication skills are being developed. They're showing that they can respect one another's opinions, respect each other as they're going through the process. And they did it with the Zoom breakout because, like I mentioned, it's difficult to put them into groups when we have such regulations at this time. But that also can be used virtually. And at the end of the presentation, I have included several links of resources that you can take a snippet of and a little picture of, and it includes the reciprocal math roles that you can print off for your students. All right, another technique that can be used to help build that reflective piece for students so that they can talk with one another is a strategy called try it, talk it, color it, and check it. And so I have included a red, yellow, green dots here, as well as cups. And this strategy, I'm not going to go in depth with because I also have the resource at the end, but it is a strategy for students as a partnered group be able to say where they are on their learning target to continuum. So in the middle of the lesson, you might say, okay, turn your cup or your dot, hold your dot up. Where are you? How are you feeling about this learning target? So that helps the students identify for themselves what skill they need to work on more. Right, discussion and reciprocal roles. These are some of the key elements of all those that I discussed. It allows for critiquing work, develops productive arguments, emphasizes teamwork, engages students in a variety of perspectives. All right, so I think we may have a little bit of time just for another breakout session at the very end. This is the last thing that I want to talk about today, is just to have some time for us to reflect on what strategies or skills did you see from today's presentation that you can see benefiting your students? Or do you have some other brainstorming strategies that you can utilize in your classroom? Let's not do breakout sessions, but if you would like to either put it in the chat room or speak out loud with your mic, just some thoughts that you have about some strategies that you've utilized in your classroom to build confidence, or some ideas that you have taken away from the presentation today. We'll do a chat or unmute yourself.
Okay, I love the Zoom conference thing with the kids because I'm a librarian, and we used to do a lot of cooperative learning things and can't now. And then we can incorporate the virtual students with that as well and get them involved in our cooperative learning group. So I think that's not just for math, but across the board. I think that's so valuable right now.
Exactly.
So Katrina, you have in the chat, what about colorblind students?
Okay, let me look at the chat just a second.
And I too agree. The Zoom conference idea is excellent. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Okay, so like for colorblind students who cannot see computer screens, is that what the
red-green colorblind is one of the most common issues.
Okay. Oh, I see.
About 10% of your light-eyed males have some form of color blindness. And in your last example, I think you had green, yellow, and red.
Gotcha.
I'm red-green colorblind, so right out of the gate, you've doomed me to failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not complaining. It's just even, I used to teach chemistry. When I would do graphing, I would use dotted lines with different hash cuts so that everything was in black and white, yet the patterns varied so that you could, regardless of your, as long as you could see, you could differentiate.
Oh,
That's my only question.
That is a great idea. I appreciate you bringing that up about having everything black, even going back to, I didn't even think about this with the stars, with their learning targets, coloring it in red, green, or yellow. Having a pattern for those students instead, like polka dots and so forth. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's a great idea to have that. That is something that we need to have more of a conversation about as a differentiation tool. We often say levelize instruction based on their level of need, but that is also a great suggestion for students that have some difficulties in that area. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, we're not going to do this since we got to talk about it, the collaborate board, but I wanted to mention one success story before I close today. I mentioned at the very beginning when y'all did your first quirk board that there were some desire for students to improve their confidence, and several students may hit a roadblock. And so this student in particular, he struggled with math at the beginning of our school year, and even last year, just having the confidence. Now he could do the skills, he can work through the problems, he can persevere, but it was the piece of like having the desire to persevere. And so he just would have such a lot of self-doubt and say, I can't do this, I can't do this. And working through that and helping him see his successes piece by piece. This is a picture of him presenting his own strategy that he came up with to solving multiplication problems. And so he asked me, he said, can I present this to the class? And that is such a huge monumental stepping stone for him to go from being very recluse and not having confidence to working on math problems to saying, can I present this to the class? And so just through all of these techniques that I've been able to implement and using Hattie's strategies, there has been a great growth in this particular student and in several students, but this one in particular because he has such a success story. So that's going to be the close of today's presentation. I hope that you left with some tools for your tool belt. I believe that Dr. Trumbull has some information to present on our program at UCA and our closing objective for today. I can bring clarity and engagement to the classroom by applying effective teaching strategies that develop student mathematical confidence. And I believe that we have accomplished that today.
I think so too. Katrina, before we jump off, I want you to talk a little bit about the program that you're in and what you're doing and what level you're working at, and kind of talk about some of the good things that have been working for you at UCA.
Sure. While I talk, I have your resources here if you want to take a picture of that. Several of the activities I've done today are on that resource list. I am currently in the Curriculum Administration Master's Program for UCA, and what I am working on is becoming an instructional facilitator or a school leader in some way, like a math coach, and building that leadership capabilities through curriculum and through curriculum development. And so that is the program I'm in, and I have 2 more semesters after this one to complete that. And so I'm very excited to have that in hand. It was originally to get out of the classroom so that I could do some more adult learning, but I have seen tremendously how it's improved my in-classroom instruction as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think, and I have been, vocal about how excited I have been for Katrina's presentation. I think that this in particular is so needed right now. The confidence for students in mathematics, changing the disposition and outlook for mathematics understanding and confidence is so important. And being able to do that in an online environment as well, just fantastic work, Katrina. Thank you.